Great, we can get started now. Thanks everyone for joining, and as we continue to admit folks, would like to get started given the clock is ticking. And thanks again for everyone for joining today's webinar, hosted within the UNFCCC Paris Committee on Capacity Building Network that many of us are familiar with, by BirdLife International, in collaboration with the UN Convention on Migratory Species. And as you can see on the slide, and when you registered, this session will very much focus on the energy transition lens for synergistic action between climate and nature, in both from global policy to on-the-ground implementation and action. And we have a really interesting lineup of speakers today. So without further ado, I will pass the floor to the co-chair of the PCCB, HRH Princess Absejigma, who, of course, many of you know, has been in the convention for many years, decades, and doing fantastic work both within Burkina Faso and on global stage. And of course, would like to thank the PCCB Network Secretariat team for supporting the organizing of this webinar and for all their incredible work throughout the years in driving synergies both within UNFCCC and across Rio conventions and beyond. So without further ado, Abse, over to you.
Thank you very much, dear Kathy. And before I start, allow me to congratulate BirdLife International as well for their long-standing work on the on environment since long, and my own country also, BirdLife, working with Naturama, and we look forward to continuing that collaboration. Thank you very much for your kind words, and the PCCB, on behalf of the PCCB, I thank you for those kind words. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to all of you to today's webinar, as my esteemed colleague Kathy has said, entitled Energy Transition for Synergistic Climate Nature Policy and Implementation. I'm Her Royal Highness Princess Absejigma from Burkina Faso, and as said, I'm serving as the co-chair of the Paris Committee on Capacity Building, together with Cecile Schneider, who's also serving from non-Annex 1 country people. It's really a true pleasure to see that we are building nexuses, and that is very important, to see how energy and environment can come along together. Before we deep dive on this webinar, I would like also to extend our warm thanks to United Nations Convention of the Conservation of Migratory Species for joining also this webinar. I would like to introduce the PCCB. The PCCB and his network are made to make sure that we don't replicate and that we are aligned with what countries want, that we are mitigating properly our work. Many countries and other stakeholders called on enhancing synergy between energy, climate, and nature. This session presents an opportunity to take stock of work carried out by different organizations like yours and explore new pathways to strengthen these efforts, particularly in the process of updating and implementing policy planning documents. Through the exchange knowledge, experiences, and case studies, we hope this session will inspire your organization to work closely in climate action, energy, and nature nexus, but build necessary capabilities. That's what we were talking about. As you know, our work in the PCCB work to address current and emerging gaps and needs in implementing capacity building in developing countries. Additionally, PCCB seeks on enhancing capacity effort, including coherence and coordination and capacity building effort related to climate actions. That's why we need the PCCB network on helping us to fulfill that mandate. Without the boldness, the ambition from our members on the PCCB network, we won't be able to. More than ever, we need the support and to scale up our impact largely. As we speak today, the PCCB network counts 413 organizations from 99 countries. We hope to really surpass that, and we're counting on you to deep dive further in your network to support that our network is expanding. And as you see in the PCCB as well, we're giving the chance to young people. We're working the talk, and I'm so glad to see that in this webinar, we're inviting Brenda, who's a young advocate for the LDCs, who's supporting very well. When we give the space to the youth also, they are contributing and working the talk together with us, and also making sure that their concerns are taken into account, because they are truly our partners, keeping the gender lens, of course, in the loop. I wish also to draw into your attention that on April 29, the PCCB Network will host his annual meeting to celebrate. That is a time for celebration for the 5th anniversary, and for others to come, of course. And we invite all the members to join us to see where are the opportunities to join and act, walk the talk. At the end of the day, it's about delivery, and we look forward to deliver together with you. Of course, as you know that we need also to go into different segments about energy, and the PCCB take the leadership on launching that cluster on energy. And we look forward to really to collaborating and see members who are within the PCCB working on energy path to join forces and to see how we can strengthen and further design to deliver on purpose for our communities who are eradicating poverty. Without energy, we can't really fulfill and implement the NDC's NAPs that countries put forward and align with the 1.5 that we all deserve to live in this planet that is livable, as the IPCC report rightly has informed us. And it's really overwhelming to see Kathy and other partners in this webinar to take us through this fantastic webinar on energy building nexuses to deliver on the ground. We need impact, implementation matters, and means of implementation matters, and we count on you on resource mobilization as well to make our dreams come true and eradicate poverty at the end of the day, implementing our SDGs, making those nexus, you have said it. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to Casey to take us through, and thank you to the COP presidency also for their leadership on capacity building. Before I end, I would like to really thank our support team, Natalia and Eva, for their tireless effort on making sure that we are delivering together. We are not competing. Together, we raise and we equalize and reducing poverty. Over to you, Kathy, to take us through, and I look forward to hearing the insights of that fantastic webinar. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you, Ebsed. That's incredible to always hear PCCB's work and also how it collaborates with other constituted bodies, with governments, with NGOs, and with others in driving synergistic policy and action. And sharing a bit of the flow of the webinar, we'll hear presentations from Tristan from the CBD Secretariat around the work they're doing, including with UNFCCC and across the Rio Conventions. And then before that, I'll also give a presentation around the work of the UN Convention on Migratory Species Multi-Stakeholder Energy Task Force. And then we'll have a panel with speakers, as you can see on the slide, with Brenda hearing from the youth and civil society perspective, as well as the work in least developed countries in terms of policy and action, as well as Gonzalo from Iberdrola, he's the Director of Climate Change and Alliances, which Iberdrola is also a member of the PCCB network. We'll also be joined by Duncan Leung. Thanks so much for joining at such late hours. He's Senior Environment Specialist at the Asian Development Bank, which is also a member of the CMS Energy Task Force. And a bit about myself, I'm Kathy from BirdLife, as you know. I lead our global policy on climate and energy. also on secondment to the UN Convention on Migratory Species, where I coordinate the Energy Task Force contracted by the Secretariat. And as Abse has mentioned, that BirdLife indeed is a partnership around the world across 119 countries. Our national partners are national NGOs driving equitable action from global level to local level, and we collaborate together with governments, with IGOs, with businesses, with civil society, and international financial institutions, of course, for synergistic action on climate and nature. And of course, energy being such a critical element that's cross-cutting is close to our heart and the heart of our partners. And within UNFCCC, we're really excited about this webinar and also aligns with the work of our panelists and, of course, the participants in terms of the synergies between climate, energy, and nature in a year where we're seeing NDC 3.0 updates of NAPS and the continued update on the biodiversity equivalent NBSAP, and both within negotiations, but also national policy and on the ground implementation. So going to the next slide, please. Thank you. To share a little bit about what does this UN Convention on Migratory Species do? For those of you who don't know, it's known as the Bonn Convention. It was established in 1979 and administered by UNEP, and it's based in Lange-Eugen. So for those of you who haven't been there, do check it out, the beautiful offices next time you're on the campus. So the convention itself, of course, being the UN Treaty on Migratory Species, it works on various issues and has various instruments across the world. And in particular, there were various COP mandates of the convention that, because of the interest from all parties, as well as different stakeholders, there was decision to establish this multi-stakeholder energy task force, which being the only task force focusing on energy nature nexus within the UN system. It has over 20 government members, as well as various international financial institutions. We'll hear from Duncan from ADB, but also we have various other IFIs, including World Bank, IFC, and our task force is currently chaired by the Spanish government with Lori from IFC, who leads their biodiversity work, being our vice chair. We also have EBRD and various other international financial institutions collaborating together, as well as dozens of NGOs, both national ones as well as international ones. And of course, IGOs like Tristan from the UN Biodiversity Secretariat, as well as IUCN and various other organizations that are close to our heart. And the work of the task force, I will share a bit more in the next slide, but regularly we report to the CMS Scientific Council and then report to the COP, which, as many of you know, COP30 is coming up in Brazil, in Belém this year, and we'll hear from the incoming presidency in the closing remarks. But Brazil is also hosting another critical UN COP, which is the COP of the Convention on Migratory Species. The COP15 is also happening in Brazil just 4 months after COP30. So for those of us going to both, we're going to be very lucky, spending many weeks in the Amazon within a short period of time, and it's truly exciting to see Brazil recognizing the importance of these synergistic issues. And we've seen the climate teams within the Brazil government have mentioned that biodiversity and energy are 2 of the 6 priorities for this presidency. And we've also heard from their counterparts in the migratory species colleagues across Ministry of Environment and other ministries that indeed climate and energy are 2 of the very important priorities for them for the CMS COP15. So indeed, we're in a year with looking at global level with challenges, but also with opportunities to bring hope and momentum for synergies into fruition. Next slide, please. So I thought it'd be good to very briefly summarize what we do as the Energy Task Force. And I thought it was incredibly difficult to summarize all the incredible work done by over 200 stakeholders over the years. But essentially, we do 4 things. One is multi-stakeholder and multilateral cooperation. And as mentioned, that we have stakeholders from governments, IGOs, IFIs, NGOs, but also we're in the preparation to welcome private sector observers. So hopefully we'll have energy businesses as well as key coalitions of private sector and private financial institutions being represented and having their voice heard, and their challenges addressed through this task force. And secondly, we empower actions, whether through the small grants program, or tools. You can see some cool screenshots on the right-hand side. We also advise on particular challenges in policy and implementation. And thirdly, we're all big fans of synergies. A focus of the task force is synergies across multilateral processes. How do we support UNFCCC with the nature angle? How do we support CBD with the climate and energy angle? And so fostering the synergies is really close to our heart. And of course, being based in Bonn, it is natural for us to love fostering synergies with other siblings on the same campus. And last but not the least, it is a knowledge hub. And thanks to all these diverse stakeholders, we produce as well as promote guidance, best practices of our members. And on the right, you can see a screenshot of our one of the recent publications with the ideas being discussed through the Energy Task Force on spatial planning for wind and solar developments, as well as associated infrastructure. And to talk a little bit more about the two screenshots, the one on the bottom is called AVISTEP. It's the avian sensitivity mapping tool that essentially helps multilateral development banks, private sector governments to understand where are the best areas to plan for energy development that has the least harm to biodiversity. And without going into details, of course, it's better for, I didn't include it in the slides, but energy transition being done in a just way benefits biodiversity and migratory species. And if we conserve biodiversity and migratory species, they also have their benefits to climate mitigation, adaptation, and beyond. So moving forward, would love to pass the floor to Tristan, who steers the climate work within the UN Biodiversity Convention, to share a bit about their work within the Convention on climate change, as well as collaboration with other conventions. Tristan, over to you.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Actually, if it's okay, I'm going to share my slides. So if I could just take over the screen sharing. This one, I think. Hopefully that's working. Can you confirm?
Yes, we can see.
Thank you very much. Wonderful, thanks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Tristan Tyrrell. As Kathy mentioned, I'm the Programme Officer responsible for biodiversity, climate change, and dry and subhumid lands. So on a technical level, my job is to look at the synergies in particular across the Rio conventions. But then also, of course, the biodiversity-related conventions are extremely important considerations as well. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on how we have looked at the biodiversity, climate, and energy nexus in just a very brief overview, and then talk a little bit more about some of the work we're doing on how to actualize that and make it put it into practice. So I should say that energy itself it's an important factor within the concerns, the objectives of the CBD, but it has not necessarily been all that explicit throughout the years. Having said that, though, at COP14, which was a bit over 6 years ago now at this point, there was a decision that recognized the CMS Energy Task Force and encouraged work to be done across in synergy and collaboration with the objectives of the task force, as well as in order to fulfill the objectives of the CBD, of course. I don't have much time, so I'm not really going to go into much detail on the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. I hope that people are at least relatively familiar with it now at this point. It was adopted just over 2 years ago at COP15, and it tries to lay out actions and addressing in particular the drivers and pressures on biodiversity in order to achieve the 2030 action-oriented targets, essentially to try and stop the loss of biodiversity and to restore it, but also to fulfill other broader objectives including ensuring that by 2050 we are living in harmony with nature, which is the ultimate vision for the framework. There are some targets, though, that are specifically related to climate change, either very directly or somewhat less direct. So target 8 of the framework is specifically on minimizing the impacts of climate change and building resilience. It also talks about minimizing the negative impacts of climate action on biodiversity. And I think that's also extremely relevant to this discussion. But there are other targets that are also important, such as target 1, which is about spatial planning. Others, target 2 on restoration and 3 on protected and other forms of effective area-based conservation measures. Those 3 are largely taken together because they are spatial in focus. But then there are others also that look at decision making at all levels, and that would of course also be related to energy needs and energy supply. And then also looking at the various knowledge systems and knowledge forms and ensuring that any action is taken through appropriate consultation participation at all levels and with all concerned. The framework also has what's not particularly friendly named Section C, but it is the cross-cutting considerations that are supposed to guide and govern all actions relating to the implementation of the framework. And these, as mentioned, are things like recognizing different value systems, taking human rights-based approach, but also looking at taking action through a whole of government and whole of society approach to ensure that we're not just talking to ourselves, we're not just working in a silo, but we are actually working collaboratively. And then that links down to the last one there, the last bullet point on cooperation and synergies. Ultimately, it's about helping to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals, but there's also that recognition that the CBD cannot do it alone. We need to be working with our sister conventions within the Rio conventions, but then also with the broader biodiversity-related conventions, as well as others such as WHO and various other instruments that are, of course, also very relevant when thinking about how nature ultimately underpins all of our societies at all levels. And the issue is just that for some, it's perhaps not quite so explicit. Specifically across the conventions, there are a number of capacity building initiatives. One of those 4 objectives, four goals of the GBF is on means of implementation, and capacity building is certainly very important within that. There are a number of capacity building initiatives, including on NBSAP, National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan revision, and also how they link through to other policy instruments. But one specific initiative that I should highlight is this joint capacity building initiative across the Rio conventions. This was initially established by the Joint Liaison Group, which is the sort of overarching synergies body across the Rio conventions. And it looks about fostering the synergies and providing some guidance materials on how to do that at all levels, whether it's at the secretariat level, but also especially at national and subnational levels. It has just finished a pilot phase and now looking into a potential next phase, which will focus more on more direct engagement with parties, as well as wider dissemination, given, as I mentioned, whole of government and whole of society approach. We recently had our 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, COP16, which was in Cali, Colombia, towards the end of last year in late October. And one particular decision that I would like to flag was the one specifically on biodiversity and climate change, which talked about the need for synergies at all levels, in particular to look at ecosystem integrity as being fundamental if we are to achieve both the biodiversity goals and targets, but also those under UNFCCC, and in particular the Paris Agreement as a whole. And so there are a number of I suppose tasks essentially for both the Secretariat, but also for parties themselves, including looking to foster stronger cooperation and synergies at a national and subnational level. But there were a number of tasks specifically to the Secretariat, one of which was looking at options for enhanced policy coherence. And this in particular looks across the three Rio conventions, but it has been noted that the biodiversity related conventions also play a very strong role in this. And so there is currently a request for views from both parties and observers on what options for enhanced policy coherence could look like, including a potential joint work program or joint work programs. And the deadline for that is the 1st of May, so next week. And then there will be in June, just in the margins of the bond sessions, a technical information exchange, which will be a half-day event, which will consider those options, those views and submissions that will have been received. There will also be consideration by the Joint Liaison Group between now and then, and it would look to try and to elaborate further on what those options could look like, and this will be considered then at Substa 27 in October. There will be a notification being sent out to those on the CBD list very shortly, and we are hoping that the UNFCCC and UNCCD secretariats will also share that notification with their respective constituencies. Just then to finalize, just looking forward then for the next few months, certainly there is this particular process as well as a couple of others which will be considered at our Substa in October. But there is also a fair amount of expectation of shall we say, a strong push on this through the UNFCCC process, both starting in June in Bonn, but then especially going into COP30 in Belém in November. And we are looking forward to the presidency taking strong leadership on that, with the support of a number of other parties, including our own current COP presidency, Colombia, and looking to see how that whole process will be taken forward under UNFCCC. And there are certainly various opportunities on the UNFCCC to allow for this as well, both not least the current discussions on the global goal on adaptation and the various indicators, etc., but also in other areas. And of course, the whole capacity building area is fundamental to that. So looking forward to working with the Paris Committee going forward. Specifically for COP15 of CMS, certainly we would like to see that the CMS parties also respond favorably to these calls for synergies. And given that it's by and large the same parties, that we hope that there will be strong messages coming from that. We're especially heartened that the CBD Secretariat has been invited to participate in the climate change working group, and looking forward to seeing how that can be taken forward. And then, of course, with the Energy Task Force, to see how we can continue to collaborate and strengthen that further, not least in helping to provide guidance to CBD parties on how they can work with their CMS counterparts. And I think I will leave it at that. Happy to take any questions if there are any. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tristan. That was very helpful overview, and indeed, I think sometimes it's quite interesting to hear certain governments come to NGOs and UN agencies curious about what other conventions are doing. Well, you could, of course, talk to us, and we're happy to help in any way, but you could also talk to your counterparts within the ministries. So that's strongly encouraged, and would definitely encourage you to talk with each other within the government, and of course with other stakeholders in terms of the CBD submission, CMS processes, and of course overall synergies across the Rio conventions. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our incredible panelists, Gonzalo from Iberdrola, Brenda, who of course from civil society and least developed countries, as well as Duncan from Asian Development Bank. So if we could spotlight the speakers, then we could kick off the panel. And just a note that the discussion will be captured and summarized into a one-pager, and that will be published on the PCCB website, especially for those colleagues who couldn't join us today. And yes, let's spotlight the colleagues. And In the meantime, after the short panel, we'll have hopefully a bit of time for Q&A. So feel free to already leave any questions in the chat or already start brainstorming them. Great. So 3 of our favorite people. My first question, I guess, Gonzalo, over to you in terms of, I just discovered yesterday that Iberdrola has been coming to UNFCCC SBs for over a decade and, doing such incredible work. So we'd love to hear from you in terms of, from a private sector background, of course, collaborating very closely with NGOs, IGOs, and coalitions. What is your experience and the action that Iberdrola is driving on the ground within Europe, but also with Neoenergia in Brazil? What is the nature-safe energy transition perspective, and also your multi-stakeholder collaboration? Gonzalo, over to you.
And all this in 3 minutes. Okay, so it's a real pleasure to take part in this webinar. Congratulations for organizing it, and thank you for inviting us. We are a very big energy company, electricity company, the biggest in Europe and the second biggest private utility in the world. Let me share with you 3 ideas. The first is that we are facing several crises at the same time. Climate crisis, energy crisis, affordability crisis, biodiversity crisis, and all of these crises share a same origin, an energy model based on fossil fuels. And all of them share the same solution, is moving from fossil fuels to renewable energies. Second message, as Iberdrola and other energy companies, we have been investing for 20 years in renewables that are becoming much and much more competitive. And things are moving forward, especially in the power sector, but not at necessary speed. But we want to assure that this energy transition, moving from fossil fuels to renewables, to solar photovoltaic especially, and to wind, is not only good for climate, but is done in harmony with nature and local communities. And for us, this is a priority, and we have set up a new goal of having a positive impact on biodiversity by 2030 and a biodiversity plan. And today, all the new facilities have a biodiversity assessment and neutrality plans that makes that they are positive to biodiversity. And already 20% of the operating assets are in this situation. And the third message I wanted to share with you is that this energy transition, good for climate and good for biodiversity, is possible. We have the technologies, firms are ready to invest, financial sector is ready to invest, is ready to finance, but we need 2 things. First is policies, because policies is what really changes the behavior of citizens and especially firms. So we need policies that move the energy sector into this direction. And the second thing is alliances. The challenges are so huge that we cannot do it alone. We cannot rely on individual actions. We need the collaboration of all of us. We need the collaboration of governments, of firms, and citizens and NGOs. So it's not that alliances are important, it's that they are the only way to move forward at the speed we need for a just and a safe energy transition. So we have an alliance, for instance, with BirdLife International. We are very happy because you are helping us to develop this energy transition in a way that is also positive to biodiversity. And we need to work all together because it's possible and it's a huge opportunity. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo, all in 3 minutes. And yeah, speaking of, collaboration with non-state actors, Brenda and myself having been focusing on UNFCCC process since I was a teenager, for those friends who know, and obviously many of the past years with friendship of the most incredible Brenda from both driving work in civil society, but also within government negotiations. So Brenda, would love to hear your views on this climate, nature, energy nexus within UNFCCC, obviously you as a loss and damage negotiator, but also your work at national and local level, also being a farmer, and I am super jealous for that, by the way, within least developed countries. So Brenda, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate you having me here. Gonzalo, you've really highlighted very key things, and thank you so much for like your highlights. I think that's really insightful. So coming back to the UNFCCC process and being a loss and damage negotiator, we cannot run away from the fact that biodiversity loss, I think it's one of the bigger problems that we keep facing each and every day. And then also we need to focus on how do we ensure, like as we are continuing with our negotiations, going back to the local level, the people that we are advocating for, the people that we are negotiating for, and everything, because whatever decisions that we make at global level, it takes us back to the local ground, because that's where like everything is going to be implemented. So it's about when we make all the decisions, how are we incorporating local stakeholders? I mean, civil societies, we could talk about women and girls groups, youth groups. How are we incorporating them, and how are we able to help them understand even the commitments that we are making in the global level? How are we involving them? We can talk about the national, the NDCs that we're submitting this year, as well as the national adaptation plans, all of those things. Like, how are we ensuring there's meaningful engagement? Because by the end of the day, we need community engagement, we need community ownership, and not running away from the fact that these are the people that are on the front lines of climate change. So I love the fact that the UNFCCC is really gaining recognition when it comes to the nature, energy, climate nexus, and then and also how developing countries are also trying to integrate these issues for like sustainable development. But then the issue comes in to say, when we incorporate them in our national adaptation plans, in our national determined contributions, how are we ensuring that the local actors are well aware, like are involved and are like consulted before we even submit these in like the NDCs, the NAPs, so that by the end of the day, they are also involved, and there's like that country ownership, local ownership, and then community engagement. So for me, it all comes back to like when we're talking about loss and damage, because that's like context based. You can be hit by the same flood, or like the same like biodiversity loss, but everyone is going to be affected according to how how resilient they are, and it all comes back like how prepared our communities are, how conversant and how exposed are they, what kind of information are we going back with to like our local communities. So I'm always like emphasizing to say, when we make these global commitments, do we go back to our communities to help them understand, to say these are the commitments that we've made and this is what means, or like the decisions that have come out of, like, for example, COP, how does that impact us in our local community, especially for LDCs, because we understand that we are like at the front line of like climate change. Me being a farmer, I think this year has been the hardest ever, because it was like one season of like rainfall, and then you're hit by floods, and then you're also hit by dry spell, which was like a bit a mixed, feeling. But then it all comes back like, how prepared are we? How are we making sure that our communities are well aware and they're able to like cope when they are faced with whatever it is that disaster that might hit. So I feel like when we're speaking about all of these things, we need to go back to and reflect to say, how are we incorporating our local communities, and how are we able to make sure that they're able to understand, so that when we're implementing it at local level, they are well aware, and there's that local ownership, and there's meaningful engagement in that. So thanks, Kathy.
Absolutely. And indeed, mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage are so interlinked. And energy, I think, sometimes being seen as a pure mitigation issue, it is clearly cross-cutting everything. And of course, We all know SDGs are so interlinked, and all the crises we're facing are interlinked with interlinked reason why we are in these crises, but also the solutions are interlinked. And Duncan, over to you in terms of, and again, thanks so much for joining at such late hour. ADB, of course, doing such incredible work on this topic. And I had to show off this copy of your Environment Action Plan that I got from our launch event in Baku. So yeah, over to you to share what, all the incredible work ADB is doing within the region, but also at global level, and all the incredible partnerships you have.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks. It's lovely to be on a panel with Gonzalo and Brenda. So yeah, I mean, we've been kind of trying to scale up our work for a little while now. And I think it probably comes back to actually some of these UN events that we actually attended. And when we first started really dipping our toes into this space was actually as a result of a CMS meeting, which was held in the Philippines. And we decided at that point to try and help support the development of AviStep. So that was where we really started to get involved, and we helped find the seed funding for that. And now we're hoping to actually get some more money, which we're hoping to be able to expand the mapper into Cambodia, Philippines, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. I had to look because I'd get them all wrong otherwise. But that is just one area that we see our work needs to focus on. In the energy transition, that is vital. We see it's not quick enough. So we thought, well, how can we help? And really, the key thing is that if you can get access to lender finance quicker and you can get quicker approvals, then you can get these projects going. And that's why things like AviStep, those mapping tools, can be so instrumental. So that really is why we were, wanting to get involved in it. But that's not the only thing that we've been trying to do. We signed up to the joint nature statement from the different multilateral development banks, which means we're now specifically trying to focus on scaling up our nature positive finance. So it's great to hear that Gonzalo is also doing the same thing from the energy sector's perspective. And I think we can learn lessons from the private sector on how to do that, because I think for the development banks, we still see that as a challenge. We're also starting to do work in the space of agriculture as well, regenerative agriculture and things like that. So it's nice to hear Brenda's stories and how vital it is to look after your land. And one area that I'm particularly involved in, which I'm very passionate about, and I am originally an ornithologist actually in my first job, is our regional flyway initiative, which we're doing in Asia. And we're really there trying to scale up investment in wetlands along the East Asian, Australasian flyway. So for us, we're kind of fully dialed into this and really trying to scale up our work. We're very happy to work with different partners, and we've had a really fantastic relationship with BirdLife and other civil society partners over a number of years. And I couldn't recommend enough that from the perspective of a development bank, and also I would say from private sector too, we are not experts when it comes to things like biodiversity. We rely on academics and we rely on real scientific evidence so that we can make our investments based on that. And that is why it's so important to work with civil society partners to make that happen. So it's nice to be here today with civil society at this event, as well as others as well. So I'll stop there, maybe, Kathy, and back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Duncan. And indeed, all these climate, nature, energy, land, all these are so intertwined. And that obviously this is such a critical year for action and ambition, as everyone have said, in the lead up to UNFCCC COP30 in Belém and CMS COP15 in Cabo Grande, both of course within Brazil within 11 months. We'll have two very critical COP to address these synergistic issues. So would love to hear from all three of you, your vision and what action have you planned as well, both in terms of policy as well as action and implementation. And of course, many of you are involved in NDCs, NAP, MBSAP, whether it's drafting or more importantly, the implementation of them, right? A plan is a good plan only if they're being implemented in an equitable and ambitious way. So would love to hear from you, your vision, your action in the lead up to these incredibly important COPs. So Gonzalo, do you want to start?
Okay, very briefly, we are going to be at COP30. We are going to be sponsors of the COP30 in Belém. So, and in this context, this issue of this nexus will be one of our top priorities. And we are going to work on 3 streams. First, showcase solutions, and innovative solutions showing that this is possible and sharing lessons, as Duncan was saying, no? Because this is not an easy question, but and sharing lessons and projects all around the world. Some of them are in Europe, some of them are in Brazil, and so on. The second thing we are going to do, we are already doing, is advocacy actions in order to, through our partnership, our alliances, we have a very broad architecture of alliances, more focused historically on climate change and energy. And we are trying to channel our positions of biodiversity within these organizations in order to include this topic, this nexus, into the NDCs. And the last thing we are trying to do is building alliances and building bridges, with civil society, showing that this is possible and this is important. This is all what, and we are of course open to, and for instance, talking about Brenda, for instance, youth, I think are a very influential way to reach politicians and to reach firms in order to understand that this is possible and that this is an opportunity, and this is a business opportunity, and it's an opportunity for prosperity. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying, in terms of it's a good business opportunity, I could hear Jesper Broden, the IKEA CEO, saying in my head that it is good business to be good business, right? And I think it's incredibly important to see business leadership like Iberdrola's action and to share that with the negotiators and mobilize their ambition through the action agenda as well. So Brenda, over to you. What is your vision within and outside of negotiations?
Thanks, Kathy. Apart from working with civil society, I'm also like the climate diplomacy advisor to the LDC chair, and Malawi is actually chairing the group. And one of the things that I think Princess Abizi is going to agree with me, last week we had our own LDC strategy meeting, and some of the things is to also look into like how do we synergize in making sure that there's proper coordination between like our ministers to make sure there's political momentum. They're able, like we have that like one voice within the LDC group. How do we prepare our ministers to make sure that whatever platforms that they're in, they're able to speak on behalf of the LDC, and they're actually able to speak to say, okay, this is what as LDCs we want to see. And at the same time, also like the submission of NDCs as well as the NAPs. How do we prepare LDC countries to make sure that when they're preparing the NDCs, it's actually ambitious and it's actually prepared or like developed with and for the people, and not just for like international community to say, okay, Malawi has submitted their own NDC, but it should be something that we know it's ambitious enough, but it's also doable. It's not just about being ambitious, but it's something that we know it's within our capacity and we'll be able to achieve that within like the specified time frame that we are trying to look into. And at the same time, also, how do we make sure that we have different actors within the group? Yes, we have negotiators, but within the negotiators, how do we bring in women and youth? I think the LDC group is really trying their best to make sure that there's gender and youth inclusion within the group, and they're really, really represented. Like Princess Happy say, she's the Just Transition co-coordinator for the group, and which is really like something that we are ambitious enough. But then at the same time, also, how do we ensure that everyone, when they're given, like they have a seat at the table, they know what to do with the seat that they have. It's not just about having a seat on the table, but being able to like bring something to that table. And I love what Duncan said, to say as as private sector, they might not be able to do everything. So this is where we really need to like promote synergies, right? How do we ensure that our technical experts and our academicians, the civil societies, as well as the private sector, they're able and to be able to know this is what we want, and these are the kind of investments that we want. And even the people that are in the front lines of climate change in our communities, they're able to say, this is what we want, and not just like imposing on them to say, this is what we're doing, but they should be able to know that in our NDCs, I think this is what we are going towards. The national adaptation plans, this is what we're going towards by being able to also have an understanding. And by that, it's not just about developing NAPs or NTCs that with like all those big jargons that they cannot understand, but how do we put it in also in a language that they'll be able to understand? And this is where like consulting them as well, like if they're involved in like consultations is coming in, because they own the process. It's like they're owning the process, they're owning the project. Right now we're talking about Article 6, and there's so many projects that are coming in our countries, but they're not going to meet me as a negotiator. They're going to meet people in communities. So how prepared are our people in our communities? How are they able to understand, to say, okay, this is the project that's coming in, this is the implication that's the project is going to have, and this is how we can benefit from this. Do they have the opportunity to say yes or no to some investments? So that's only possible if they are involved in everything that we're doing and the projects that we're doing. I think, thanks, Kathy.
Absolutely, Brenda. And Duncan, over to you. And especially, obviously, COP30 is important for ADB, COP15 is important for ADB, and COP31 happening in Asia Pacific is, you know, home game. So over to you. What is your vision for all these three things coming up?
Oh, well, actually, my focus at the moment is actually on the Ramsar COP in July, because I'm very interested in wetlands. But I think, you know, there's a lot of you know, important synergy there in relation to how wetlands can deliver from a climate perspective, as well as for local people and biodiversity too. But yeah, I mean, we've got a busy year. As most development banks are a bit self-centered, we have our AGM coming up in Milan in May. And one of the things that's interesting that we're going to be doing there is we're actually launching a partnership with the UK government. And one of the reasons we're trying to do that is because the UK government has such a lot of expertise that we really want to try and pull in to doing work with us, including through civil society. So looking at things like Central Asian flyway as a new area for us to focus on, looking at things like regenerative agriculture and building off the knowledge that is coming out of the UK and things like biodiversity net gain and things like that. We're also at the COP in Brazil later this year with the other development banks. We are hoping to be launching a taxonomy on nature finance that we are then going to use moving forward, which will be able to allow us to track our work across the different institutions so that we have a better chance of understanding apples and apples, if you like, which is exciting. And then in the beginning of next year, we're also going to be starting to implement our new environmental and social framework, which is really setting a new bar, I think, from that. And maybe last thing to mention is that we've also started, maybe for Tristan's benefit, to help support the government of Armenia with supporting them, because they're going to be hosting the next CBD COP, and Armenia is in our region. So we've just started that. So that's one thing I can just mention, that we're helping them out a little bit with that at the moment. So back to you, Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all three of you for packaging in all these incredible insights in a very short amount of time. And many of you, participants will see you in the upcoming UNFCCC sessions and other events. So and of course you can always stalk all of us on in a good way online. And with that, I'll pass the floor to Leonardo Feldman, who's the capacity building negotiator from Brazil, which of course being the UNFCCC COP30 presidency with many other big engagement coming up. So Leonardo, over to you to share, what is your vision in terms of capacity building negotiations, but also broadly on climate, nature, synergies with energy.
Hey, Kathy. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me. And thanks, everyone, for having me today. It's been a very busy year in Brazil. We are having many important events. Besides COP30, we have the COP for biodiversity, and also the BRICS events this year. And as we come to the end of this event today, I would like to stress I couldn't stress more the importance of synergies between the conferences, Rio conferences. And also, I would like to, it's been a year of much reflection and a lot of calls to action. And in the first letter from our designated president of COP30, we are reminded that the more ubiquitous our fight against climate change becomes, the more we need to incorporate synergies between climate, biodiversity, desertification, and sustainable development goals. These interconnected agendas cannot be addressed in isolation, of course, and they must be approached together with due coherence, urgency, and ambition. From our Earth Summit in 1992 to Rio Plus 20, and from the birth of the SDGs to the adoption of the Paris Agreement, we have seen the power of multilateralism to chart a common path forward. Now, as the world is looking at Brazil, and this time to the Amazon, we face this pressing need to turn frameworks into action and to move from promises into implementation. This is really the motto of our COP30 this year, implementation. We need to, not stop negotiating, but in a way, um, focus more on implementation. And this is why the concept of multirão, which is inside our first letter from the president designated, uh, this concept means a collective effort grounded in solidarity and shared purpose. This is why this concept is so timely. The world really needs a global multirão involving NGOs, governments, um, civil society in general way, and companies to ensure that agreements we already have are being fully implemented in order to keep our 1.5 degrees Celsius target within reach, and also the to halt and reverse deforestation and other um, objectives related to biodiversity and the synergies between the conferences. We need to protect the integrity of our ecosystems and the dignity of our communities. Uh, this is why the COP30 presidency has rightly placed three goals at the heart of the process. The first one is to defend multilateralism. The second is to connect the abstraction of negotiations to the lived realities of people, much like Brenda was mentioning before during this seminar, and also to accelerate the implementation of the Paris Agreement, which is essential uh, for our climate normality. Also, we are having a circle of presidencies during the COP. This initiative will further help us build on the legacies of past COPs and align efforts, biodiversity, climate, and sustainable development agendas, and bringing together resources, mechanisms, stakeholders to make the difference on the ground. And as we look ahead, we should carry this spirit of collaboration. That is what our presidency this year of COP30 wants, that we elevate the voices of indigenous peoples, local communities, that we really unite and make this Musirão work. So thank you very much, and may the road to Belém be paved not only with commitments, but with real and lasting transformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leonardo. That was incredible to hear Brazil's leadership and vision on that. And indeed, the Mutirão concept, it's obviously today's event is all about synergies between multi-stakeholder, between multilateral, between different governments, and across multiple crises that we are facing that require synergistic solutions. I want to thank all our speakers, and we've heard from a diverse set of stakeholders today, from governments, from UN agencies, from business, from civil society, and it's incredible to hear your vision as well as the action that you're driving. And just to blurb, the Secretariat of the PCCB network is launching an energy cluster soon, so stay tuned to that. And of course, this is such an exciting year, even within UNFCCC process itself. We have the upcoming CBD Technical Information Exchange right before the Bonn negotiations of UNFCCC. We have the Ocean Dialogue there. And of course, many of us are really looking forward to governments and others coming together to foster synergies across Rio conventions, perhaps through a joint work program, if everyone fulfill my dream. And so do reach out to the Secretariat or ourselves if interested in getting involved in any of the initiatives that we mentioned, or if you'd like to find out more. And yeah, excited that so many governments also joined us today as participants. Hope this was helpful information. And unfortunately, we're out of time for Q&A, but do reach out to us. And we look forward to driving action together within this very exciting year ahead. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day, wherever you are. And good night to Duncan in particular for staying up so late.